Welcome back to my Pokémon Platinum Hardcore Nuzlocke walkthrough. In the last episode, we picked up a Scyther and used it to run right through Maylene and the rest of Veilstone's gym. A bunch of new items and encounters were acquired along the way, and now that the 4th badge is in our possession, the rest of Sinnoh is really starting to open up now. Pastoria City, here we come. The road from Gen 4 Casual to Platinum Master continues. Let's do this. Alright, so remember when I said that there's not a whole lot of items to pick up and things to do at the Hotel Grand Lake? Well, I guess I wasn't completely correct in my analysis there, as there are a few pickups towards the southern end of the area that I completely forgot about. You can also get the TM for Trick Room from the clown within the house on the left. I've never used it, but it doesn't seem like it would be too great if I'm being honest. In a double battle scenario, I can see it having more use, but when you're playing one-on-one, you're just not going to get enough turns out of Trick Room to justify its usage, I think. But like I said, I've never used it, so I could be wrong. And we pick up a yellow shard right outside the entrance to the south. Now that we're in the main area of Route 213, let's go over the items and the matchups. This route is littered with hidden items, most of which will be either pearls for some extra cash or heart scales, which are very useful, and they will come just in time since they can be first utilized in Pastoria City. And outside of those hidden items, you can pick up the TM for Aerial Ace, which we covered in the previous episode. Always nice to have moves that don't miss. For the matchups, the only Pokemon on the entire route you should be wary of is Fisherman Kenneth's Gyarados. Thrash, Bite, and Leer is nothing to take lightly at this stage. As we move away from the beach area, we run into a patch of grass where we can obtain our next encounter. And it's a Wingull, which, like Girafarig, is just fine. Pelipper makes for a pretty solid water type overall with passable stats and the ever so common water type package of Surf and Ice Beam. Worth noting that it can get Tailwind as well for some pretty neat team support. For our run though, it'll be just another backup most likely. Well, that went pretty quick. We're already in Pastoria. This has to be one of my favorite towns in the whole game if I'm being honest, if nothing else but for the very useful conveniences that it provides. Starting with the berry patch that can be found right in town, you get 2 person berries out of it, which is always nice as confusion can be a pretty common status condition to encounter in most Pokemon games. But what I love most about this berry patch specifically is how accessible it is to the player. Every time I get to Pastoria City, the first thing I do is take all of my most valuable berries and plant them in this patch. Because it's so easy to get back to, all I have to do is fly back to Pastoria and then bam, it's right there. You can also find the hidden zinc in the southwest corner of town in this puddle, and if you're okay with bending the rules a little bit, you could pick up the Macho Brace in this city as well. But honestly, I haven't even picked this up yet, and I'm not sure I would want to even bother. The Macho Brace is obviously a powerful tool that makes EV grinding a lot easier, but the problem here is you'll have to show this kid both a male and a female Combee, which is just really annoying. It's here if you want to go through that hunt, but I think I'll just skip this. Moving on to some of the cooler features of Pastoria, we've of course got the move reminder inside the house in the middle of town. This is always a great tool to have and will expand your options further in battle. There will absolutely be a heart scale guide for Platinum coming in the future, so look out for that for some tips on how to get the most out of them. Over in the house closer to the western entrance, we've got a girl who will provide a free berry every single day. But not just any type of berries. These berries will reduce the incoming damage of a super effective attack by 50%, and there's obviously one for every type. Super interesting and totally worth it in my opinion. And this free berry each day is even more relevant considering that they cannot be found anywhere else in the general overworld. The only other way you can obtain these berries is from specific wild Pokemon, each having only a 5% chance of holding one. I would personally recommend trying to get back here each day if you can. Now that we have Fly at this point, it makes it pretty painless. And finally, you can obtain an encounter here if you don't already have a Magikarp or a Remoraid. I will not be picking up either one for this playthrough, as Magikarp is now banned in more of my general Nuzlockes, and I don't really care for Remoraid all that much. Octillery is a very weird Pokemon that can be okay, but there are obviously plenty of other water types out there that will outperform the Octopus. With the most significant stuff covered now, let's grab our encounter from Pastoria's famous Great Marsh. I am absolutely not going to go over this place in fine detail, because honestly that probably deserves its own video. What what you really need to know as a Nuzlocker is that you don't really have too much control over what Pokemon will show up here. There are several different ways to manipulate this. Kinda. Like I said, I'm gonna try to make this quick. For me personally, I'm going to take a look at what's out there with the binoculars, pick a spot, and just hope I get something cool. What I will definitely go over are the plethora of items you can obtain around the marsh. And there's a lot. Starting with Area 6, which is the area right outside the entrance to the marsh, you can obtain a random shard from this ace trainer here. And I believe this is another daily as well. Another reason to come back to Pastoria on a daily basis. You can also grab the red shard in the southeast corner of the whole marsh. Moving into the next area, which is right above where we just were, we actually ran into our encounter first, because I forgot to pop another repel before falling into the mud. And it's a Tangela. Both Tangela and Tangrowth are very solid Pokemon despite their poor typing in grass. Okay, I guess they're slow as well, which doesn't usually add up to a very useful Pokemon, but these two are a bit different. Stats are great, and also very unusual for the grass typing. They definitely mix things up a bit in that respect. Tangrowth in particular makes for a fantastic addition to any Sun team, as both of its abilities are extremely useful in that setting. Chlorophyll is especially great at making up for this line's poor speed stat. And there are some fantastic coverage options here as well, which most grass types do not usually get. Moves such as Ancient Power, Earthquake, Aerial Ace, Brick Break, Shockwave, and even Rock Slide. And since both of their attacking stats are excellent, you can mix and match with whatever you prefer. Back in the Great Marsh, and we slowly but surely slog through the rest of the bog and pick up the various items lying around when we can. These mud tiles are the worst thing in all of Pokemon, I think. No, really, and if you don't have repels, then you're in for a real treat if you find yourself in the middle of a big pile of bog. At least in Platinum, you can kind of see where it's safe to walk, just avoid the really dark spots and you'll be okay for the most part. Some of the highlights of items you can obtain here include more shards for the move tutors, different types of Pokeballs, which is nice not to spend money on, the Toxic Plate, which like the Poison Barb will increase the damage of poison type moves by 20%, and a Leaf Stone if you need that to evolve something. There was a hidden rare candy somewhere as well, but I just got too frustrated and just left without it. It's somewhere in the top left corner of the marsh, I think. And that's pretty much it for this place. I really like the idea of the Great Marsh, and overall I do think it's one of the more interesting Safari Zone type areas. I just wish mud was a little more forgiving. We are at the point now where we've seen all that needs to be seen. Pastoria can only give us one thing now. A badge. But, quick warning before you continue, you will be challenged by Barry right outside of the gym as you try to enter, so be prepared. He's still not at his very best just yet, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't come in with some sort of plan. Luckily for us, we have perfect answers to basically all of his Pokemon minus his Staravia. No team review needed for this one. Let's get into it. Barry leads with Staravia as usual, and we lead with our Drifblim. The big advantage for us here is our Drifblim's Shockwave, which is not only super effective against Staravia, but will also completely ignore any double teams that come out. And that is basically exactly what happens here. We do get hit with a meaty wing attack, but that's okay as we won't be needing Drifblim services anymore. Now all that's left are Barry's standard starter trio types of water, grass, and fire, and since we also have those types, the rest of the fight should be fairly straightforward. Roselia has no issue whatsoever dealing with Barry's Prinplup with Giga Drains. With Ponyta, I switch into Floatzel, and in response we get hit with Ember. Come on, Game Freak, you couldn't let Barry's Ponyta have Flame Wheel? It's Platinum, give him a break. A speedy Aqua Jet on the next turn brings the Fire Fold down, and finally we have Roselia to deal with. And, well, I think we all know how this ends. Another rival fight in the books. He'll definitely get a lot stronger in the next few fights, and I'm looking forward to the challenge. Now that Barry has fallen, it's time to take on his idol in Crasher Wake. Be wary of the trainers in here. Each one has something that can deal a reasonable amount of damage to your team if you're not paying attention, especially the Gyarados and the Whiscash. And with all of the trainers and the gym puzzle taken care of now, it's time for another team review. We obviously took the time to train up a bit before this fight so we can catch everyone up to speed, including our new Bronzong, who will be nice to have as a lead and a pivot for this fight. I'm going to use him to eat the incoming Intimidate from a Gyarados and throw up a Reflect to start the fight, since the bulk of Wake's attack power will come primarily from the physical side. I will then switch into Rosalia to potentially sweep the rest of the fight. This is all completely dependent on how the fight against Gyarados goes, but the idea would be to set up Leech Seed and take him down with Giga Drains. By that point, I'm probably going to have to switch back into Bronzong and hopefully get off another Reflect against Floatzel, and then switch back into Rosalia to see if I can bring it home with more Giga Drains. And then Quagsire will of course go down to a single Giga Drain or Magical Leaf. If I need more help on Floatzel, I have quite a few backups, starting with Drifblim, and you'll notice that I've equipped that Yachi Berry we received from our Starly at the very beginning of the run. This should allow us to easily tank an Ice Fang, and then a Shockwave should finish the rest. We have our own Floatzel obviously, which could potentially get one hit off at least, and we have Scyther as well. Although, I'm not so sure we can take an Ice Fang or not with Scyther. And last but not least, we have our, for the most part, bench warmer in Infernape. I also just wanted to take the time to show off our ridiculous level 36 moveset. This is so broken. Alright, enough chatter. It's WrestleMania in Pastoria, and I'm not leaving here without that belt. The fight starts out just as expected, and without any wrinkles. Gyarados hits us with a pretty hefty waterfall while we set up the Reflect. Alright Rosalia, time to do your thing. I opted for the wide lens in this fight so that there wouldn't be any issues with landing the Leech Seed. And from here, all we have to do is avoid back-to-back crits and Giga Drain to victory. On our last turn of Reflect, Gyarados goes down. In comes Wake's Ace in Floatzel, and this is a perfect time to switch into Bronzong to set up another Reflect, as I know it's going for that Ice Fang. The only situation we truly need to avoid here is a crit range on a potential Brine, but he ends up going for the Crunch instead, which doesn't deal a whole lot, and I'm very confused by that move. The second Reflect comes out now, and it's time to go back into Rosalia. Floatzel does opt for the Brine this time instead of Crunch, which works out beautifully for our Grass type. Just need to avoid a crit here. And luckily we do, and the Giga Drain in response takes a massive chunk out of Floatzel's health. Healing us back to full in the process. After the Citrus Berry does its thing, we go for one more Giga Drain, and thankfully no drama. With only Quagsire remaining, this fight is over. I've been very good at not jinxing us so far, but I just can't help myself right now. We are absolutely dominating these fights. Let's see if we can keep this up for the rest of the run. Upon exiting the gym, Crasher Wake comes out right behind us to disown the apprentice that he never asked for, and then said apprentice tells us someone plans on setting off a bomb in town. Well, Jesus, so much for these harmless galactic grunts. All of this hoopla is really just used as a setup to finally meet Cynthia again, who will give us the secret potion that will allow us to continue to push the story forward. But before we head back over to Route 210 to begin the arduous trek through the notorious foggy routes, we've got an optional route to cover in Route 212. While Route 212 may not be required, I highly recommend exploring this route to the fullest, as there are some great features to utilize here, including one of the fastest ways to make money in the entire game. More on that in a minute. You may have also noticed that I replaced Scyther with our Ralts. I just wanted to mix things up again, and I also have very little experience with Gallade, and I would love to see how powerful it really is. Starting with the southern half of this route, I'll mention real quick that it is rainy, so be aware of that. And there are water types on this route this time, so pretend those Pokemon get a 50% buff in damage when you're going through here. And there are some pretty good battles to be had as well. Ranger Taylor right outside of the gate is rocking a Carnivine and a Luxio, with the Luxio in particular hitting pretty hard. 2 of the 3 fishermen on this route are sporting Gyarados, and Collector Dean is using an Umbreon and an Espeon. More and more evolved Pokemon are showing up in these random trainer battles now, so don't let your guard down. The items on this route are a pain in the ass to get, as some of the good ones are hidden within the mud. I definitely got a lot more frustrated with this muddy area than I did with the Great Marsh, and I was not having a good time with this. But if you do go through the effort, you can grab potions, Pokeballs, a blue shard, the TM for Silverwind, which is pretty cool, although there won't really be a scenario in which you get stab benefits from this, but moves that have a chance to boost all of your stats at once shouldn't be brushed aside lightly. And we can fittingly get the TM for Toxic as well, the gold standard install strategies. At this point, I decided to go for our next encounter, and I'll be doing it on this side of the route as the Pokemon you can obtain on the southern end are a bit more interesting in my opinion compared to what you can catch up north. And it's a Croagunk. Fun fact, there is a 5% chance for wild Croagunk to hold Black Sludge, which is basically leftovers but for poison types. I think overall, Toxicroak is just pretty solid. Really interesting type combination with plenty of move pool options to play around with. And if you do get Dry Skin as an ability, then I think you're definitely looking at an above average Pokemon. Having an immunity to water just seems really strong. Croagunk is really bad on its own. It's basically unusable honestly because of how frail it is, and the evolution is very late at level 37. But luckily in a Nuzlocke setting that doesn't matter too much, as the level cap by this point in the game is now past that. But since we've already got a few fighting types on the team, I'll pass on this little guy for the run unless I need him as a backup. Finally almost done with the southern end of this route, but there is one more thing to take care of, and that is to evolve our Curlia. The Dawn Stone can be found in a pile of mud as soon as you enter the route from Pastoria, pretty much in the top left corner here. I think Gallade will be here to stay. And just to show you guys how much diversity this thing has in its move pool selection, take a look at what we've got going on here. Earthquake, Drain Punch, and Leaf Blade, which came from the move reminder in exchange for our first Heart Scale. Teleport will be quickly replaced soon enough with Psycho Cut at level 31, and we've got what appears to be a pretty terrifying offensive force here. I am excited to start using him. And I just realized I'm 6 pages into the script, so I guess this is going to be a long one. Let's cover the northern end of Route 212 before we wrap up. Instead of trekking all the way back through the mud, I just flew over to Hearthome to approach the route from the top. It must be said that I enjoyed this section of the route a lot more than its southern half. While it is very plain, I suppose it just has a nice vibe to it. Let's get into the trainers first, and there are only 2 that I really want to talk about here. Remember when I said you can make a ton of money on this route? Well, this fine lady and gentleman here will make you rich. Equipped with an amulet coin, Jeremy and Reyna will dish out over 10,000 Pokédollars every time you defeat them. Pair that with the Versus Seeker and a nice little jog here and there, and you've got yourself a pretty awesome money-making machine. This is normally the point in my playthrough where I stock up on a bunch of those fantastic Game Corner prizes to better prepare myself for the rest of the run. Definitely utilize these 2 to your advantage. We've got a couple of simple items here in a Citrus Berry and Green Shard, and it is possible to obtain the TM for Sunny Day as well once you obtain Surf from Celestic Town, so come back for that if you're interested in running a Sun team. And last last but not least, we've got the Pokemon Mansion that the route as a whole is truly known for. There isn't a terrible amount of content here, but there are a few things to mention. You can pick up the Soothe Bell on the second door on the left side, which is great because there are plenty of friendship evolutions in this game, as we've already gone over. And finally, there is a challenge you can do each day that involves battling these maids. There are 5 maids in total that you have to face back to back, and if you defeat them within a specific amount of turns, there will be a special battle with either Rich Boy Liam or Lady Celeste. What's special about Liam and Celeste is they each have a level 35 Blissey that's holding a rare candy. So not only do you get a ton of experience from defeating those Blissies themselves, but you can steal those rare candies as well with a move like Thief or Covet. And on top of all of that, you'll make a ton of money off of them as well, especially with that amulet coin equipped. Really interesting challenge, but unfortunately our thief user kinda died, so we'll probably end up skipping this. And with that, this episode is now over. A longer one today for sure, but I'd like to keep it going that way if possible. We covered a lot of ground in this one with a couple of boss fights that went way too well, and I'm especially excited about our new Gallade. In the next episode, we've got Cyrus, Celestic Town, and beyond. Let's see how far we can get. In the meantime, as usual, please like the video if you liked it, and subscribe for more content like this. That's it for me. I'll see you next time.